Okay. What are the fundamental values upheld by the form of nationalism you advocate?
Basically, it's the right of individuals, obviously British Nationalist Party.
So you didn't say the form of nationalism we advocate. That's what I was saying about when I ask the question, you've got to try and...
You want to cut out your questions when you do it?
Yeah, that's right.
Right, okay.
Sorry,
right.
That.
Okay, no, that's fine. Let me give me a couple of seconds though.
Yeah, that's right, yeah, sorry. What nationalism you advocate?
The National Front believes that within the nation state, in our case because we're a British nationalist party, within the British nation state, that the people should determine as directly as possible all the things that affect them. That's their economic well-being, their political climate, what sort of government they have. Now, as against the current system where it's been described as an elective dictatorship. Once you have a government, they do what they like. We believe that a lot of crucial issues should either be decided by referendum amongst the British people, or, wherever possible, the power to make those decisions should be handed back to the British people. So we believe in a much more direct form of democracy than is general in Britain at the moment. And, for example, on international treaties, we believe that things like the Treaty of Rome should only be signed by a government after consulting directly with the people. At the other extreme, on many economic policies, we simply believe there is no role for government, that the power to determine economic matters should be handed back directly to people, giving back their economic freedom. So primarily it's giving British people back the right to determine their own future, and that's the fundamental belief of the National Front.
Thank you. What economic problems are inherent in free market capitalism?
The real problem with free market capitalism is that it will lead inevitably and inexorably towards a vast accumulation of wealth or economic power by a small number of individuals. In the past this has meant feudal landlords. In Britain in the 1990s it means the ability to wield enormous economic power by a small group of people based primarily in the City of London. They're able to close factories, move factories from one part of the country to another, indeed from one part of the world to another, without reference to the people that have built up those factories and those businesses by their own labour. The only responsibility of people working in the City of London who deal in such things is to turn in a profit. And if it's more profitable to close down a factory in the West Midlands and reopen it in Korea, then they will do so. And that is what free market economics inevitably leads to. Enormous power, which can be used to oppress small groups of people, small communities. And we feel that is entirely wrong. And so the National Front is totally opposed to free market economics.
Thank you. What is the National Front's policy of distributism, and in what ways does this differ from the free market model of capitalism?
We advocate a policy of distributism whereby real economic power will be handed directly back to British people. Now, the key word in that is directly. We've heard a lot over the last few years under Thatcherism of giving people a say in the running of the country. But in reality, if they own 20 shares or a couple of hundred shares in a company, they have no real say in it. What we believe in is that the people who work in a factory, work in any form of business, should have a direct stake in that business and be able to make decisions for that company. So, for example, if you take a small business, perhaps a transport company, employing maybe 100 people, we believe those 100 people jointly, not equally but jointly, should own that factory, own that business, and as a result they determine what that business is going to do. Now, going along with that, you would have to have a process of education, because people will be asked to be made to make decisions which they haven't been used to making in the past. How much money is going to be reinvested in the company, how much is to be paid out in wages. The argument that's gone on in Britain for, well, ever since there's been owners and workers. But we seek to eliminate that difference by making all workers into owners. But the key of our system is that directly. The only argument we've ever heard against it is that does tend to put everybody's eggs in one basket. If you not only work in a factory or work in a business, but you own it as well, of course, if it hits bad times, you have to take the consequences. But we feel there are good ways around that. Britain boasts an excellent insurance market. We're sure that that can help. And of course, successful businesses means that workers would do very nicely out of it. But the prime part is that they identify with the business. They're part of it. We get away from the structure we have at the moment where an owner lives in London, the workers work in the West Midlands or in the West Country or wherever. We want economic power and economic responsibility together in the same place, in the same people. And I think all the indications are the British people would thoroughly enjoy being able to take direct responsibility for the places they work, actually have a direct share in the ownership of it.
Thank you. Why is the National Front in favour of the nationalisation of banking?
As a general rule, the National Front is not in favour of nationalisation. We don't regard it as an ideal system to run any business. There are, however, a few exceptions to that. The water system in the country, we believe, should be controlled directly by the government. Electricity power, we think it makes more sense to be provided as a service, not as a profit-making business. And same is true of money supply. We believe it's quite wrong to hand out the right to create credit to private institutions. We believe that is a fundamental service to be provided and controlled by the government. In the past, individual financial institutions, banks and so forth, by their ability to create credit, have inevitably affected inflation 2 years or a year later. And we feel that this is something that the government must accept responsibility for. As far as the consumers are concerned, they wouldn't notice a lot of difference. We would still have Lloyds, Barclays, Midland, or perhaps the Shanghai Bank these days. But all of them would actually be owned by the government rather than by the shareholders at the moment. We feel that the government must take responsibility and control of how much credit is pumped into the economy and therefore how much inflation is stoked up. To try and direct it by a sort of second-hand mechanism, as is done at the moment, we feel is unacceptable and leads to all sorts of complications that we would not like to see.
Thank you. What do you think has caused the resurgence of free market ideas in recent decades?
There has been a resurgence of free market ideas in economic circles over the last few decades, but I think this has been largely at the instigation of the large business concerns. They're obviously in favour of anything that leaves them free to do whatever they like without government restraint, and their influence is pervasive, certainly within the Conservative Party and even to a large extent within the Labour Party. What big business says tends to go. And people tend to look at, when they talk about business, they go to the big firms. For example, everyone regards one indicator of the economy as the Stock Exchange 100 share index. Well, that is only a tiny proportion of Britain's economic industry. You might be better off to go to a street market in North London and ask stallholders there what business is like. That would be as good as, or perhaps even better, economic indicator. But we think that the influence of large industries on political decisions is quite wrong. Big business, first of all, shouldn't exist. We would like to see it split up into smaller concerns, but they have far too much influence, and we believe it's largely because of the influence of big business in this country that we've been steamrolled into the European community, because the only people that benefit from that are large industrial concerns which can concentrate their resources in one area in Europe and then just distribute to the rest of the community. So although there has been a resurgence, we feel that it's led by the people that benefit from it. And I think if you ask many people, you'll find that there's no sort of enthusiasm for free market economics. There's just a lack of alternative being proposed at the moment. We're obviously seeking to redress that balance.
Thank you. What are your main philosophical objections to classical liberalism and libertarianism?
We're opposed to classical liberalism and free market libertarianism because it allows individuals to acquire enough economic power and political power, but primarily economic power, to oppress other people. And we feel that a limit should be put on the amount of economic power that any individual or group of individuals can hold. So that, for example, we don't believe it is right that, in a recent example, Robert Maxwell was able to control an enormous media empire